Welcome everyone to our webinar of the month with Stingray filters. And tonight our presentation is how to use the LB color combo polarizer with Dave Hutchison. By way of introduction, Dave has 15 years photography experience and over 20 years of business experience. He has over 100 images published in books, magazines, calendars, and etc. around the globe. Dave is continuously inspired by both landscape and wildlife photography and has photographed across Western Canada and the Yukon, many US states, and recently in Italy. Dave is also an advocate for sound old growth forest management practices and believes that increasing public awareness through photography and videography, we can come to terms with preserving old growth forests in British Columbia and beyond. Most recently, Dave received his advanced operations drone pilot license, enabling flights in controlled airspace in Canada. This new avenue has opened opportunities in real estate, tourism, and commercial photography that were difficult to access in the past. Dave offers private and small group lessons for both in the field and post-processing. Dave also co-leads with Matt Shannon Photography and Vision Quest Photography workshops on Vancouver Island, Colorado, and the Arctic. So Dave, I'll let you take it from here. And if anyone chimes in with some questions, I'll let you know.
Thanks a lot, Michelle. That was great. Yeah, so it's my first webinar for Singh-Ray. So honored to be the first international ambassador for Singh-Ray. Had to talk to Laura a few times to try to get to join the team, but eventually it happened. And yeah, I've been using the Singh-Ray LB color combo since sometime around 2006, 2007 is when I first got one. And I know they've changed since then. And it's just been a regular part of my workflow for my landscape photography for it's like a better part of 15 years. So, and yeah, so what I'm going to do tonight is I'm going to go through, some areas to give examples, real life examples of what I work in, like seascapes, forestscapes, macro, travel, tourism. I'm just going to try to give a wide variety of examples where the LB color combo can be used. Yeah, so I guess we can get started, and I'll move along to the. Yeah, so what we're going to talk about is that, to how to use it, why to use it, where does it come into play, those types of things. For me, it's become second nature now. So like often it'll be on a few lenses. And sometimes I don't use it, but it's pretty rare. And again, so just a bit repetitive here is that the applications is what I'm going to go through here. And then we'll have a section here on tips and tricks, and some cautions, some things to kind of keep in the back of your mind, that a couple of maybe pitfalls, I guess, but there's ways to work around it. So and then a question period at the end. Can you see my mouse when I'm moving it around here?
Yes, I can.
Okay. Just one. I wasn't sure if it was just me seeing that.
Yep.
Okay, so we'll keep. We'll get into it. So I'm going to move my pictures here that I see of you and me. So like on this seascape, for example, for the use of an LB color combo, it's in that blue hour, the sun's set, and it's really good for the sky, so really bringing out the blues in the sky. The LB color combo is good with greens, reds, and blues, and that's generally the main colors. And reflection control, contrast. So this royal blue sky is being helped a lot by the LB color combo, and then this definition in the sky here, this contrast. And often when I'm using now they're they're a circular polarizer. So I don't want to assume that everybody knows what I'm talking about, but they're not, the LB color combo is not like a drop-in polarizer that goes in a bracket or anything like that. All my filters from Stingray that I use are all threaded, and actually it comes in a couple of different designs, I guess, if you want to call it that. There's one with, this has no front threads, so it's called a thin mount. And the thin mount is my preference because there's less material that sticks out, and then it can photograph at wide angles. So on my 14 to 30 mirrorless Nikon lens, there's no vignetting with the thin mount. So that means you won't see any of the material of the filter when you're photographing. For me, it just saves time in post-processing if I don't see the filter when I'm photographing. Yeah, and I think somewhere around, if you stack filters, it's somewhere around 16, 17 millimeters on that Nikon lens, the 14 to 30 f4 mirrorless lens. So yeah, I just wanted to make a note. And then the other thing is that these filters can also, you can get them with front threads. So the front threads will allow somebody to stack on maybe an ND filter on front of the polarizer. But then there's more material, so you probably would see it at wide angle. And that would be termed as the vignetting. So that's just kind of and I'm sure that's laid out on the Singh-Ray website, those details, but happy to answer.
A lot of people, when they are stacking things, what they'll do is they'll put like a Hilux on the front of it, which is ours is a slightly warming, but it's a UV filter, and what it does is it protects anything behind it as well. So
Great.
A little more protection for your lens or for your filter that you've got on there.
Sure. Yeah, and then on that note too, thank you, Michelle, is that Singh-Ray makes nice pressure caps that sit on the front of the LB color combo or whatever filter from Singh-Ray that you have, and they work fabulous. I could probably get one out of my bag pretty quickly, but they're a snug fit. There's not like the click ones where the sides click like on the Nikon caps. So those are very handy. So I use that if I'm walking through the forest, and I'll put on one of those pressure caps, and then that protects the front of the filter. So I really like those. But so back to the kind of the use of the LB color combo. So on this one here, I've got reflection control in the ocean here. And then it also is working in my favor that because it's approximately 2 1/3 stops of loss of light, like the density of the filter, that's working in my favor because I'm wanting to get a little bit longer shutter speed to smooth out this water. So that's an advantage in this particular case. And it wasn't windy or anything like that. And these trees on the sea stacks, they're pretty stiff. So it takes quite a bit of a wind before you start to see those blowing around. But yeah, so that's just something to keep in mind when the shutter speeds start dipping. And sometimes it's because of putting on a polarizer like the LB color combo, that just be aware of if there's any movement, then that's going to be revealed in the image. And sometimes another image needs to be taken. Actually, that waterfall shot right on the very front page is 2 images, because when I used the LB color combo, there was a breeze. So the foliage is blurry at the top, but then I took another image with the polarizer taken off. So I call it the foliage shot. So that's just something that it wasn't applicable in this particular image, but it's just something to be aware of, that sometimes you can have movement that you don't want. It's usually, in what I photograph, it's usually foliage, blurry leaves or tree branches that are moving, things like that. Yeah, so I think that's.
Do you have any photos in here with and without the polarizer to compare?
No, you know what, and I will have in the future when I do another one of these. But
so what would this image look like if you didn't have the polarizer on there? What would?
Well, yeah, the sky would definitely be a paler blue. There would be less contrast, and then the water would be edgy. So the water would be, because the shutter speed would be faster, the water would be a little crunchy and edgy. So those are things that I'm not wanting that. So I didn't want that. That's why I wanted to have, and it's not really that long of an exposure, 0.8 seconds, but it's enough with the tide moving back and forth that it'll get smoothed out. If you really wanted it totally glass light, then you maybe do 2 or 4 minutes or something, and it would be different filters.
We do have some photos if you want to look online on the Stingray website. I just put a link in the chat window. And we've got some photos there, and you can see with and without the polarizer what difference it makes.
Yeah, and my apologies. I just hadn't been doing that over the last few years. So yeah, it's just, but now I can see that there's a need to have those before and after pictures, and I'll be more attentive.
On there, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, we can move on to another one. So this is a popular spot on Vancouver Island, Mystic Beach. And, some questions that I do get, and these might come up later in the questions and answers, is about, post-processing and those types of things that often come up. And this image, it was bright because it was in the winter. And when the sun sets on that part of Vancouver Island, it lights up this whole sandstone rock wall. And the LB color combo will help pick that up, but it's also bringing out the blues in the water. And another big thing on why I used it on this particular image is that there was glare on this rock. So when I'm turning to polarize the LB color combo, I'm watching for the glare on the rock to go away. So you have to actually, you turn the polarizer as you're looking through the viewfinder, and eventually the rock will go almost black. So then the glare will pretty much just go away. So, and that's what I wanted. I didn't want kind of an edgy, glary kind of spots on the rock, because they can end up being distractions for the viewer. So especially if they're really kind of bright white or bright yellow, and just an unwanted distraction. So composition wise, I like those benefits of the reflection control. So that was a big one on this one. And then again, getting the shutter speed down, because as you can see, there's lots of light here. And the sun was strong bouncing off, and the light was strong bouncing off the rock walls, but it's acting as a twofold filter, in the sense that it's getting me down to the shutter speed that I'd like to have to get texture. So it's not, the filter isn't creating the texture, it's the reduction in the shutter speed that's it's a benefit of using it at that moment in time to get this type of composition. And I like this, the shape and the texture and the motion. Yeah, you could get that with another filter too that slows down the shutter speed enough, but then the contrast and the color will be different. So in these greens are starting to pop out in here. The LB color combo is helping with that too. Like an image like this, average post-processing time might be 15-20 minutes. It depends on how much I want to fuss around with it. So sometimes they take an hour or two. But the LB color combo definitely helps with less post-processing, but everything needs to be post-processed. Like it's like, maybe one out of a couple hundred images that come out of the camera. It's just like, oh geez, I don't really have to do anything to that. It's rare in what I do with landscape photography. Everything has to be post-processed. Sometimes they're image blends, sometimes there's a color cast, could be lots of different things. So there probably will be questions on that come up, but I can move along here. Here's another seascape example. So the LB color combo really helped here with reflection control on the water. That was the big one here when I walked up to this scene, is to really get this under control, so the glare isn't an unwanted glare. So from the viewer's standpoint, and the reds and the contrast in the sky up in here. I think I used a split grad filter too. I'm sure that I did on this one, but I didn't put that down in the filter use. But it looks like I would have used maybe a 2 or 3 stop soft by the looks of it. But it definitely, yeah. So contrast and definition in skies, reflection control in water, and pulling out these reds, the reds and orange, magentas, and little bits of purple up in the sky. The LB color combos all coming into play with those, with bringing out those features in the image. So, and the greens too. These greens here, this little bits of moss along here. I really like the LB color combo in the forest, which we'll get to soon enough with the images, because it's just great with greens. So yeah, so okay, so we can, that's I think that's about the end of the seascapes. So this is where I'm kind of transitioning through to some other examples other than seascapes. This is a new image from this past weekend. Workshop partner and myself were scouting for a workshop up in the north part of Vancouver Island, and that's where this was. And there's a whole network of caves in behind here. But automatically went to the LB color combo again, and great to pull out this green color out of the water, this definition of this little stone that's tucked away down here. These things are all playing into the composition. And backing off of, there's a bit of glare on this rock. I dodged and burned a little bit on this rock, not too heavy, but yeah, it's the texture and the motion of the water too that the LB color combo helped. I didn't have to get another filter out and stack or something like that. It's just, and then when I see that shutter speed that I want, I'm usually using the ISO to move around a little bit. And I'm not shy to move it to 100, 200, 400, depending on what the light is and the depth of field and where I want to have the shutter speed sitting. So I'll often move the ISO. And on the modern day camera bodies, they're so forgiving. And we'll see when we get to some forest images that sometimes it's 800, 1200, 1600 ISO in the forest. Depends if it's moving or not, the foliage. But so yeah, so this is a new image. And then the greens, this green up in here, this feature of this little tree, if you want to even call it a tree, growing out of the rock. That's the LB color combo, hard at work right there. There's no editing on that. That's the way that it was. So a little bit of editing to bring out these greens a little bit more, and it's just a taste. But yeah, and the overall contrast and the richness, I guess that's another word to kind of use, that depth and richness. The LB color combo is helping out a lot on that. So yeah, and the texture too. I'm just looking at my notes here using shutter speed. And when I framed this, I thought, way this water's running around here. So you can start to see how this texture is actually framing the image. So the flow of the water coming around here is working right into the composition. And that's the shutter speed, 1.3 seconds to get that. Yeah, so I can move along from that one and see what the next example is here. So again, waterfalls, rivers, streams. There was a lot of glare on these rocks. And, I could maybe even work it a little bit more and take some of these out, but it was basically almost unphotographable without the LB color combo or some high quality polarizer. So I remember this scene, even though it was a few years ago, and I've been back here several times. This is still one of my favorite images from visiting this location. She's probably been to this canyon and waterfalls at least 6 or 7 times over the years. And every time it's different seasons, different water flow, different light. Rocks don't move a lot. These big rocks have been here for the same time period, but a lot of glare without a polarizer. And the polarizer, again, I just encourage you when you use one, is that you really have to make sure that you're dialing it in and making sure that it's polarized. So, and especially, this is a tip, is that if you've been photographing a lot horizontally, like in the landscape mode orientation, then you go to flip your camera to photographing vertical, make sure that you adjust the polarizer, because it won't be polarizing anymore when you flip the camera to vertical.
So how many shots does it take? How many do you take while you're adjusting it to see how long does it take to get it just right?
It can be, I usually take at least a half a dozen images of the same scene, especially if the light's changing like it was on this.
Right.
And then it's usually when you get home, you just pick the best one.
Right.
Sometimes there might be a blend of two images, creatively. Actually, I have an example of a blend, an LB color combo blend, which is further along in the webinar. But sometimes I blend them. It just depends on how much the light has changed. And I guess an example, just to talk about that, about what I mean, is that, so if the light is changing a lot, and say on this rock, I can get it polarized well, and then not on this rock, and then the light changes, and then this one I can get it polarized and the other one isn't, then that's how I would blend them. I would actually choose and then reveal this through Photoshop with a layer, and then reveal one of the rocks through on the master file.
Right.
So it can be a polarizer blend in a way, and I have an example of that. So yeah, it just depends on how far one wants to stretch it creatively, but that's kind of answering in a roundabout way your question about how many images would I take. Really depends on the lighting conditions and how much it's changing. So, but often half a dozen at least. So, and then kind of go from there. But yeah, wet rocks is a big one, for what I do and the reasons why I use an LB color combo. So again, sky, ocean, water, slowing down, getting texture, but wet rocks, it's great. It's yeah, because especially when they've got glare on them, they're just they can be not pretty unless that reflection control is managed. So okay, we can move on to another one here. And yeah, this is not too far from where I live. It's outside of Souk on Vancouver Island. It's a popular place. There's lots of photographs have been taken of this one. But again, it's another example where I'm getting control of the shutter speed. So 1.6 seconds. So I'm dropping the shutter speed where I can get texture and it's not too edgy. So if it didn't have the polarizer on there, this would be quite crunchy. It would be, well, it would probably be, might be a fifth of a second or a tenth of a second or something. And it wouldn't look like this. And then there was a log down here that was floating around and moving. So that's a little bit blurry. I can maybe even clean that up a little bit, but that's just a side effect of having the slower shutter speed. And so again, if things are moving, just being aware of that. But these reds and magentas, these are being picked up by the filter. So, and I don't believe there's a split grad on this, single shot. Yeah, the filter it really came in handy here. And then it's darkened this and given that mood, that kind of bit of a dark, mysterious mood, but with no polarizer, there'd be glare in here on top of this, the water running across these rocks up in here. So this is darkened by using the LB color combo, but one has to really pay attention to make sure that it's polarized properly, because you just have to look through the camera and dial it in, and you see what I mean as you're going through twirling the polarizer around. But so I'm constantly moving that because the sun's changing, the sun's moving. And then if I move my position, then I have to repolarize. So I have to readjust the polarizer. So I've just gotten into the habit of just continually doing that. And so I'm happy with where it's at. But that's something to definitely pay attention to. Okay, so what I think we're going to be getting in. Now we're getting into forests. No, one more: waterfall, rivers, and streams. I guess it's kind of part forest. You can see how the greens are really lively. And sometimes it can maybe get a little bit, might not look like it's too much saturated. And occasionally I've had to reduce the saturation or reduce the white balance and kind of just, maybe I might not want it as warm as what it may make it. I might want to cool it down a little bit, but it's fine tuning. It's usually not a drastic change that's being done, but it's also just something to be aware of with the LB color combo, is that depending on the situation, and the taste and your own personal taste, sometimes the mosses or the greens can look oversaturated, but it's small, but it's not hard to correct. Yeah. So, and again, it doesn't happen often, but it has happened to me a few times. So it's just something to be aware of, but it's still fine for me. Nothing's 100%. So, yeah, so these, I believe I reduced the saturation on this green moss because it was like overcast in the winter, and it's just like, boom, like greens are just, they're popping in that type of condition. And the LB color combo was great on these rocks. A little bit of glare on this one here. Maybe could have done a blend. But these rocks were definitely, the reflection was reduced a lot on these rocks with the polarizer, and then getting the shutter speed down too. So that's an example. And the reds in the leaves too. That's all getting picked up with the LB color combo, the polarizer.
So John wants to know, are you using the baffle on your Z7 for regular lenses? And are there any limits when using the LB filter?
Yeah, so if it, maybe she's referring to like the lens hood. I think that might be what the person's referring to. And then, yeah, the lens hood does become a bit of an irritation. So sometimes I use it, sometimes I don't. If there's strong side lighting coming in, then I'll polarize and then I'll put the lens hood on after. But if I move or something changes, and I've been there for an hour and the sun's moved, then I have to take the lens hood off, repolarize, put the lens hood back on. So, the lens hood's going in and out of my pocket all the time. But if it's overcast and it's not raining, then I'll try to shoot without the lens hood. It's just easier to shoot without the lens hood, but sometimes it just doesn't work, especially, I'm spending a lot of time in rainforests, and the lens hood comes in really handy for that. So it helps keep the water off the lens, but hopefully that's what the person was referring to. So not a really straight answer. It's yes and no, but depending on the conditions. That I'll use a lens hood. I just use it if you can, but I wouldn't want it to stop somebody from adjusting the polarizer correctly, because that's where it gets tricky. You really have to be able to get it from the sides to turn it properly. Yeah, so, but it's possible. Yeah, lots of pictures I've taken with no lens hood and just the polarizer on the front. So, a good question.
Richard wants to know, how do you keep the water white?
The water white, I selectively edit the water in Lightroom, and I adjust the white balance on the water independently from the rest of the image. So I don't do global adjustments for the editing. So I'll select the greens separately. Say for example, I want to warm up the greens or the foliage. I don't want to warm up the water because it's going to turn the water yellow. So I will erase, I'll put a mask over top of it, of the top of the image, and then I'll erase the waterfall, make my white balance or whatever adjustment that I'm making. Could be whites, could be blacks, could be highlights, whatever. And then I'll do the water separately. Like on this image, the water would have been done separately. I know for sure on the very opening image of the new waterfall shot that was more kind of like a panel looking, that the water was done separately. Because the LB color combo also does some warming. So that's where the post-processing comes in. And it's just really what your creative vision is and what you like. But yeah, to answer your question, though, to have the water looking like water, where it's not too blue and it's not too warm, it's in the post-processing. Any other questions, or you just they'll kind of get doled out as we go?
That's it for now.
Okay, great. Okay, we'll move along here. Okay, now into some forest stuff, forest and foliage. One of my favorite forest shots here is unprotected old growth forest called Eden Grove that's close to Port Renfrew, and it's been in international news because there's actually blockades there, and activists are blocking it off for logging, and the police are involved now because there was a successful injunction. It's been in the courts, and anyways, it's too much. It's not. I don't want to go down a rabbit hole about that on the webinar, but it's a special place. It's you can feel it when you walk in the forest that it's a spiritual place. I can, and I've heard it from lots of other people. But in regards to the filter use, now these reds here, the soil is high in iron for where it's located in the watershed and on the side of the hill going down and towards the river. So this is real. This is what it looks like. It's, when the conditions are right, and it's, again, it's overcast, or I think this was in the fall. So the LB color combo again helps with the greens and the reds on this one. And another thing that I really like about, well, a couple of things I like about the filter use on forest shots is getting control of the glare on the bark. So the bark can sometimes get, because it's usually wet. Again, that's the other thing is that, again, rainforest, lots of times it's wet. It doesn't necessarily have to be raining, but it can be damp and wet, especially if I'm in there really early in the morning. This foliage can be wet. I don't think the greens were too wet on this particular day, but the bark was damp. So again, dialing in the LB color combo, you can see how the glare basically goes away on the bark. And I've used it time and time again for that purpose, to take unwanted glare. So I'm not dodging and burning for hours on end, and trying to fine tune it that way. So I might have dodged and burned a little teeny bit across here where it's a little bit bright, but not much. It had taken me like 30 seconds or something. So the greens and the reds are the big one here on this one to get this type of effect. And it has a soft focus in post-processing. Oh, that's another thing to mention, that with the LB color combo, there may be questions about this, but I don't see any sharpness loss. And I think that's one of the things that I really like about Singh-Ray in general as a company, is that they're super high quality. So I'm generally not the one I don't compromise very much, if any, on my camera gear, my filters, my backpack, my tripod. I just, I do this full time, and I'm just not into compromising on any of those things. I just want to do the best that I can, and I don't want gear issues. And I don't have any gear issues with Stingray. So like they're sharp, and it's great color, very little color color cast. Yeah, so this one has a creative effect of a soft focus on purpose. It's just what I wanted to do. That has nothing to do with the filter. So kind of a bit of a dreamy glow, and that's just what I wanted to do. So wet leaves, wet bark, the reds and the greens. So that's that tends to be the theme in the forest, and we'll kind of get on to here's another one. Oh, it works great on boardwalks too. Wet boardwalks, fabulous for taking glare out of cedar boardwalks or whatever they're made out of. Especially if they're wet or the sun's shining on them, it'll reduce it. But yeah, if they're wet and overcast, they can pretty much eliminate like 95% of the glare off a boardwalk. And that way, do you want the viewer's eyes to go to the glare on the boardwalk or to look at the image as a whole? And that's where the filter helps. It helps communicate that vision, and having these nice rich greens. Again, I'm also hand picking these times. There's lots of bad images too that I have where the foliage is blurry and it's just like, nah, that didn't work. But these are images that have been collected over a dozen years, and there was no wind. So if you start getting into breezes and it's windy, unless that's what you want, there could be a reason to photograph it that way. I just like to have them sharp. So you have to, because the shutter speed drops, so this is at 1.3 seconds at 800 ISO, that gives you an idea that it was dark, but it was also very calm because everything's tack sharp at 1.3 seconds. And if it was breezy, then that wouldn't work. So you have to kind of pick and choose about the times of the day, usually first thing in the morning for these types of shots before the winds get up.
Tom,
Yeah.
Tom wants to know, do you shoot an aperture priority?
Yes, often. Thanks, Tom. That's a great question. For forests, yes, aperture priority. Generally, I just use manual if it's wildlife or night. That's when I use manual, and that's just kind of my style. But you could photograph this in manual and still get the same results. But my preference, I like aperture priority, and I just use exposure compensation to fine tune, and along with the filter, and yeah, and then move my aperture or my ISO so to where I want the shutter speed to be. So.
And Eli wants to know, do you calibrate the white balance with the filter on or off?
I do it with the filter on, and in my Nikon Z7, which is my current camera, I really like the natural light auto setting. It's a new white balance setting that wasn't on my previous camera body that I had. And that works really well. And it seems to kind of get it in and around about 5,500, 5,700 degrees Kelvin. And that's kind of the area that I like to photograph in. But I don't know if I really even would call it calibrating, but I that's kind of where I start from. If the light changes, and it does change when you get into the afternoon, and then I'll often will adjust my white balance so it's not so warm. I'll cool it down a little bit more, but I don't worry about it a whole lot. I like to try to get it close in camera, but I usually adjust it in post-processing because I'm doing a selective adjustment. I may want to cool something independently. So don't really worry about the white balance a lot, but the natural light auto works really good. So that particular setting, I use the daylight one sometimes, and those seem to work. But if the white, I don't use cloudy that much because cloudy tends to, with the LB color combo, tends to warm it up too much. So maybe that's a good point to kind of hit home with. I used to use cloudy a lot, like years and years ago, but I just find that maybe my tastes have changed a little bit. But you start getting up to like 6,500 degrees Kelvin, that's usually where the cloudy white balance setting lands you. It starts to get too warm for what I do. you know, for other scenes, like maybe in the Grand Canyon or something, or maybe that would be great. But for what I do, it tends to be a bit too warm. So hopefully that helps with the fellow's question. And I'm gonna zip along to another. Okay, so yeah, we're coming up with a couple of different ones here. So macro. So this is kind of a macro shot here. So it's local. It's the Butchart Gardens in Victoria. It's only maybe 20-minute drive from my house. Again, very weather dependent. So I used an LB color combo on this because I really wanted to get the glare down and bring the reds out and try to get the glare down on the water drops a little bit. I wasn't really sure how it was going to work, but in the Z7, there's an automated focus stacking feature. And then once, you know, I programmed that, and then this one was 30 images at these shutter speeds here, and camera settings. And I used the Nikon macro lens with the FTZ adapter because Nikon doesn't have a macro lens yet for their mirrorless system. Hopefully sometime this year. But yeah, a little bit tricky. They can be tricky, fussy images, but I've done lots of focus stacks with and without the LB color combo, and you know, often they don't work. There'll be something blurry, or Photoshop, the photo merge won't work properly. It wouldn't blend something together. Usually it's in the edges. There'd be something blurry. Sometimes you have to crop it in. But this one, it worked. So the use of the polarizer was quite handy. So I just wanted to give an example that, you know, and that's where we're kind of transitioning into now in the webinar with my examples, is giving you some examples of some other things that one might not think of. But see, like on this one, because I wanted to have the shutter speed high enough, now I got to boost the ISO. So because if, you know, taking 30 shots, bang, 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 one after each other, as fast a shutter speed as possible is going to be beneficial, because you don't know if there's going to be a bit of a breeze come up in the middle of shooting the 30 images or whatever it would be. So yeah, it's a little bit of a hit and miss technique, but occasionally it works. But I just encourage you just to, you know, to try it with the filter, try it without, and see what you like. But yeah, I've had it work well. And yeah, it's another one in the garden. So this one worked really well on the wet stones. So, and then getting the reflection control down here. The other thing that's interesting about the LB color combo, and it was on one of the other river shots, is that you can often see things in the water that you wouldn't normally see, like if you didn't use the polarizer. So like these, you can see how like there's these stones through the water. So it's picking up, it's reducing the reflection and creating contrast. And you can see these stones are being revealed. So it's kind of, I've coined a term with my long exposure workshops, the art of seeing what you can't see. And the filter definitely helps with that. It's working in your favor for that. Is if there was no filter, it would just be more glare, and there would be less contrast, and you might be able to see a little bit of the stones, but not much. But it can be a nice benefit and a nice surprise, because sometimes something is revealed that it's like, oh, that's neat that I can see that through the water or through the river. Or, I didn't know that rock was there. And sometimes it can work well in the composition. And you can see it in the camera when you're photographing. Yeah, and it's helping with the greens here too. It's making the greens more vibrant, and the oranges and the reds. Still got some glare on here. And again, it's not 100% reflection control. It turned this down quite a lot, but this had a lot of glare on it. But yeah, I've reduced to the point where I think it's tolerable. And I've sold this image. It's gone into calendars, this particular one. So yeah, so wet stones, glare on the water, damp leaves. Yeah, so that's that one. Oh, this is the blend one that I was talking about earlier. So what I did on this one is that, so with these ferns, I did a shot where I could only polarize this part of the ferns. So as I twirled the polarizer, I couldn't, because of the angle of the light, it was side lit, I couldn't get all the ferns polarized in one shot. And I thought, okay, well, I'll just do 2 shots then. And then, so polarize these, then I took another shot, twirled the polarizer 1/8 of a turn or 1/4 of a turn, whatever it was. And then it polarized these ferns. And then I manually blended them together in Photoshop to create one image of what I saw. So, yeah, so it's just, it's another way to have a more pleasing looking image. So just, I guess where the technique is that just if you can only polarize part of the images or part of the rocks or some of the sky, some of the foliage, sometimes you could do 2 or 3 shots and then get everything polarized. So I don't do it often, but it has worked before, and it worked on this one. I was happy with the way it worked on this. And you can't have anything move in between, because then it starts to get, when you're blending images, it gets weird if things are moving. So again, calm conditions really help if you get into any kind of image blending, or it can get to be a headache if stuff is moved. And sometimes it's just not worth it to put the time in. Okay, so now on to a couple of different types of examples. This image is a new one from last week too, on that same trip where I had those 2 rocks in the river, in the caves. Polarizers helping with the chrome, because this was getting quite a lot of light on it. This is during the day. It was partly cloudy, so it wasn't like bright sun blasting on it, but Polarizers helping on this one. And I've got one of my new lenses. Love this lens, incredibly sharp, and no problem with the LB color combo. The sharpness is still bang on. So this is, I've only had this lens for a couple of weeks, but I love it. It's incredibly sharp and great to use with the LB color combo, and also looking forward to trying some long exposures with it, with some Singh-Ray NDs. So that's another example where you can use a polarizer. So I wanted to show you some things that aren't always in nature. They can come in, it can be windows, wet sidewalks, chrome, like on this image, for reflection control. And then we've got the reds are being boosted a little bit here, and then the overall contrast. So similar type of theme with lots of other images. Now on this one here, scenic travel shot, it's helping with the greens, but really pulling out this blue hour and the magenta in the sky, and reflection control on these windows. I remember the windows going down, like just having a little less glare on them. So it works great on windows, cars, shiny cars. Like if you're going to photograph a car show, LB color combo would be great. So that's another.
You're talking about the cars. Dale wants to know, or he said, I thought polarizers had no effect with reflection on metal. So is that a misconception?
I worked on the chrome.
Yeah.
Worked on the chrome. I think that if it's really, really harsh, then it probably doesn't have as much of an effect. But I've used it on metal, not a lot. It's not a big part of my photography, but I would just encourage the person that asked to try it. I don't see why not. I don't see why it wouldn't help. It works with, like, these tiles were all damp and wet on this shot. Because this in the middle of the winter, and it's damp around here all the time on Vancouver Island in the winter. And there's little bits of glare on the gray stone walls. But but I don't have any specific examples of cars. So I would just encourage the person that asked to try it and see if maybe Stingray has any examples. But it worked on the chrome on that last shot that I showed that I did on the weekend. So, but yeah, so just wanted to show another example where the LB color combo can be used, and it's just lots of different ways for reflection control that one may not kind of think of right off the top of their head. I see what else I've got here. Oh, black and white is great too. Yeah, like and getting the sky nice and rich and blue, that's a benefit for creating a black and white. So, or maybe even like infrared. I have only done a few images infrared, but yeah, when you can deepen those blues in skies, it's going to be great for black and white because then you get deeper blacks. So I would definitely encourage that in somebody's workflow and trying it. So I like the way that it worked on this one. Got deeper blues for the blacks. So, and I didn't really do too much for reflection control on this one. Might have done a little bit on the foliage, but I don't remember them being a lot of glare. I used it more to get the definition and the separation between the clouds and that deep blue sky, and then convert it into black and white. So let's see what we've got. It's another, oh, now we're on the kind of tips and tricks. So that's the examples that I've got for tonight. So so for tips and tricks, adjust the polarizer. You just really can't emphasize that enough, especially if you're rotating back and forth from horizontal to vertical. I forgot before. It's happened to me, and more than once. Is that, oh, I'm gonna take that shot vertical and forget to adjust the polarizer. Most of the time, I catch it and I think, oh, geez, yeah, I gotta adjust the polarizer, and then take the shot again. And yeah, completely different. So yeah, and then if you move, right, if you're at a waterfall, you change location, you move 10 or 20 feet down the waterfall, make sure you recheck your polarizing for your polarizer. And this goes for any polarizer. This isn't just the LB color combo, it's any of them. Is that if you move or the sun's moved or something's changed, I always recheck. Oh, and then for the sky, I find backing off from full strength, I back off about 1/8 of a turn. Yeah, I just find that sometimes the full strength is too much for a sky, but again, it's just taste. It's just taste. It just depends on what somebody likes. I like it backed off a little bit. But that's just, that's taken a few years to kind of get to that point where I know that I can just back it off and it's just, okay, that's what I like. So sometimes you have to desaturate slightly in post. We talked about that a little bit. So don't be shy of doing that. And it could be a white balance adjustment or saturation adjustment or a little bit of reduce the vibrance. And again, I'm not talking a lot. I'm talking like in the numbers in Lightroom, could be 3, 4, 5, 6, that kind of thing. It's fine tuning. So, and yeah, I touched on the natural light auto white balance. That's what I like for the type of photography that I do, especially in the forest. It works great. And this is another image. It's a focus stack, and the LB color combo worked great for the greens on this one. And the contrast, the color, there was actually a lot of glare on this fern. This was only, I think, last year, the year before, and it helped a lot in regards to getting the look that I wanted to get. And also converted this one into black and white too. It worked well for that. But so that's tips and tricks and cautions. So I'm going to move this back up here. So I actually called Laura yesterday at Singh-Ray and I said, remind me what the lighter, brighter part is. I forgot what that was about. So once upon a time, the LB color combo years ago used to be around 3 stops. So they made it lighter and lighter in regards to density, which made it brighter. So that's the LB part. So now it's about 2 1/3 stops loss of light compared to like maybe another brand's filter that might be similar, might be around 3 stops. So I like it right around where it is. So occasionally, if there's too much movement because of usually wind, then sometimes it just doesn't work. You have to put the ISO up or not use the filter. It just becomes a choice. So again, mindful of shutter speed because you have a loss of 2 1/3 stop of light, and that will be a choice to make in the field. But it's great if it's calm or not a lot of movement, works great. So again, that's being in the forest. If it's out in the ocean and you know the rocks aren't moving or anything like that because they're stationary, then a bit of a breeze isn't going to be an issue in that type of a shoot. Or photographing a car at a car show. If there's a bit of a breeze, doesn't matter. So when I'm talking about the breeze, it's usually in the forest. And then, they can fog up under cold, damp conditions, but you know what, any filter can. And that's why I put this picture in. This is really bad conditions back in the early part of the spring. And it's just like, oh man, what am I doing here? And it was nasty and I couldn't use filters. I started to use them, but it was like 3 or 4 degrees and raining, and then it was really damp. It stopped raining, it was really damp. Couldn't photograph the filter on. It was just became too much to manage. And it's just the math of cold. When I say 2 or 3, 4 degrees, I'm talking about like 38 to 40 degrees Fahrenheit. I was talking Celsius. So yeah, just a little bit above freezing. And if it's damp, not a great time to use a polarizer or any type of filter. It's not a Stingray thing. It's just something to be aware of when you're photographing. Check to make sure that your filter is clean if you're in that type of environment. I always carry rags with me. They're all over the place in my pockets.
And Stingray
Yeah.
makes something called Ray View for cleaning your lens, and it actually can help a little bit with the fogging if
Awesome.
that's
I'll have to
something.
get some of that. Yeah, in fact, I think I spoke to Laura about that a month or 2 ago, so I'll have to
Ask her
revisit it.
nicely for a trial size, and I bet she'll send it to you.
Awesome. And on another note, the Singh-Ray cleaning cloths, I love them. The little blue ones, they're great. The material is just right. So again, I'm fussy with that kind of stuff. Is that I've had bad cleaning cloths that just don't soak up anything, and so yeah, just make sure if you order an LB color combo or whatever from Singh-Ray, make sure you get a couple of their blue cleaning cloths because they work. They're great. And then I think I did touch on this. If you're stacking, this is kind of deviating from just using like an LB color combo by itself, but it's still important to note is that if you're going to stack filters because you want to polarize and then extend the shutter speed even longer by putting an ND filter on top of the polarizer, because the polarizer would go on the camera first so you can polarize. If you're going to put a 10 or 15 stop ND on, you can't put the polarizer on last because you wouldn't be able to see what you're polarizing because it'd be too dark. You have to make sure you get the right polarizer that has the front threads. So, or you won't be able to screw another filter onto the front of the LB color combo. So it's just a choice. It would just be a choice about, what you photograph and how you use your filters. I just wanted to bring it up that there's a benefit to having front filters, and there's a disadvantage because you got more material. I have them without the front threads because I want them as thin as possible so I can photograph at 14, 15, 16 millimeters. and still use it and 0 vignetting. Again, that's on the Nikon mirrorless. That's an 82 millimeter front thread. And I remember when that came out, that was unique in the marketplace. I think it was it might have been the world's first wide angle lens that took a threaded filter on the front. So probably not the world's first anymore, because there's a whole bunch of manufacturers that made them since then, but it's only a couple of years old, but stuff changes fast in the camera business. But yeah, so those are just a couple of tips that I could go on and on about some other tips, but those are kind of the four big ones for filter use, and specifically some of them with the LB color combo. And I think we are coming to an end. So now we got questions.
Yes, we do.
Okay.
A few people mentioned the Stingray blue and gold polarizer. Have you toyed around with the blue and gold yet?
I have used it in the past. It was a number of years ago, probably 8 to 10 years ago. I found it too warm myself, but like white balance could have been wrong, or like I just want to throw caution into the wind that was a long time ago, and we all change over time, and skills change and become attentive to different things in the camera settings and compositions. But in the current era, no, I haven't used it, but I have used it in the past, and I don't have it anymore. Yeah, just see if you can try one. See if somebody has one in the camera club, maybe in your area, something like that, where you can try one first. It may have a really good application that I don't know about, but yeah. So sorry, I don't have a great answer for you on that one.
Tom wants to know, is there an application for portrait photography where there are colorful backgrounds, or wildlife photography, such as in Africa?
Yeah, there could be. Yeah, for sure. I think that Singh-Ray offered to make a polarizer. I don't know if it would have been an LB color combo, but for my large 500 mil lens, it takes a 52 millimeter rear drop or rear mount filter. And so if I bought another one that was the Nikon Polarizer, because it has a little wheel at the top where you can adjust it, they'll swap it out and put in a Stingray one for me. Just my only caution on that is that, again, Africa, it would probably be different, but where I am, it's often dark where the bears are and where the wildlife is. I don't want to lose any stops of light, because then the ISO will shoot up. So I myself don't use filters for wildlife because of that particular reason. But in Africa, if you're shooting during the day and there's lots of light, it's possible that a polarizer with some contrast properties would be beneficial. So I would check in with Stingray to see if they can swap out the glass in your actual holder that you may have in your lens. Or you might have a telephoto lens that's got a 95 millimeter thread-on filter on the front. I guess that's possible too. It just depends on what type of lens it is. But I've just chosen not to use a filter for wildlife just because of a lot of the lighting conditions that I'm in.
Right. So our speaker for next month, actually June and July, is Vinny Colucci, and he does a ton of wildlife shots.
Okay.
And so he's sort of our in-house expert on filters and wildlife. So if anyone's shooting a lot of wildlife, I'd definitely tune in. It's going to be a 2-part series, so he can go a little bit deeper into things in July. So we're looking forward to that.
Great.
And then David wants to know, do you have problems with polarizers with very wide lenses, like 14 millimeter or 16 millimeter?
No, and yeah, we've touched on that. The key thing is to make sure you get the thin mount. So good question. So that if you order one, that make sure you get a thin mount, and then that works on the Nikon 14 to 30 mirrorless S lens. There's no vignetting at 14 millimeters. So, but if you got the thick mount that has the threads on the front, so you could stack something on it, you might be able to see some of the material. I don't have a thick mount filter, so I don't know. But
He's talking about not vignetting. He's talking about changes in sky color.
oh, changes in sky color. Are you talking about color cast or changes in sky color? I don't have it. There's no problems with changes in sky color with wide angle. Maybe what he's referring to is that sometimes in the sky
He
you'll
says
get
yes, color cast.
right color cast. Gotcha. Yeah, understood. So what I do in that case is that sometimes if it's wide angle and you're photographing the sky and there's, we'll say white puffy clouds, you'll get light blue on one side, dark blue in the middle, light blue on the other side. And it starts to look a little bit maybe not real. That's where you back off that half of a turn or quarter of a turn, not a half of a turn, an eighth of a turn or a quarter of a turn. And to balance it and have it look like it's more fluid. But no, in regard, that's more of adjusting the polarizer itself. But back to the question of color cast, which can be different. No, these are color true. Yeah, I don't have any issues with color cast with Stingray products. Yeah, and I've done some 10-minute long exposures with the 15-stop slow-mo, no color cast. So it's great because it's less post-processing. Yeah, because color cast can be, problematic. Sometimes with other filters that I've used in the past, it'd be a magenta cast. You see a magenta cast, but no, not with these. I haven't seen anything. And usually the color cast, you start getting at longer exposures too. So.
Okay, I think that's it for the question. So if anyone wants more information about Dave, his information is on the screen, his website, Facebook, and Instagram, so you can see more of his images and check out his workshops. And we hope that you will join us next month with Vinny Colucci for our filter boot camp. And I wanted to thank you, Dave, for your time tonight and your preparation. And this is really good information.
Thank you very much for having me.
All right, thanks everyone for joining us. Have a great night.
Goodbye.